Welcome to the Solution Nation podcast. My name is Sean Snowday, and I'm the president of Solution Nation. Solution Nation is dedicated to providing a platform for investors to learn about Israel's most dynamic public and private companies. We interview lead venture capitalists, Wall Street analysts, investment bankers, and managers of incubators and accelerators. Our guest today is Kimberly Yee, Arizona's anti-BDS treasurer. Kimberly Yee is a staunch and effective foe of the BDS campaign against Israel. She divested Arizona's $143 million investment in Unilever when Ben & Jerry's, its subsidiary, severed its ice cream sales in Judea and Samaria. Ms. Yee placed Morningstar on Arizona's list of prohibitive investments due to that company's subsidiary, Sustainalytics, using antisemitic sources to negatively rate companies transacting businesses in Israel. Under her watch, Arizona's investments in Israel's bond surged threefold. Please remember that all content provided on the Solution Nation podcast and website is for educational purposes only. Nothing shall be construed as investment advice. Investment decisions shall not be made based on information, written, verbal, or otherwise, posted or spoken on Solution Nation. Conduct your own research or consult with your own investment advisors before making investment decisions. So here's my good friend, the host of the show, and the CEO of Solution Nation, David Wanatik.
Welcome to Solution Nation, everyone. My name is David Wanatik. I'm the CEO of Solution Nation and run the Solution Nation podcast series. Today, we're very fortunate to have a wonderful guest. Her name is Kimberly Yee. She's currently the treasurer of the great state of Arizona, where I live. Kimberly Yee is a graduate of Pepperdine University, where she earned a bachelor's degree in political science and a bachelor's degree in English. She also holds a master's degree in public administration from Arizona State University's School of Public Affairs. Kimberly was elected to the Arizona House of Representatives for the 10th Legislative District from 2011 to 2013, and the Arizona Senate for the 20th Legislative District from 2013 until 2019. Kimberly Yee was elected as Arizona's treasurer on November 6, 2018. So Kimberly, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
So we all know that the treasurer is a very important job. We might not all understand exactly what the treasurer does. So maybe you can just take a minute and talk about your core responsibilities as Arizona's treasurer.
Yes, well, thank you. Arizona Treasurer is a statewide constitutional office holder, and I am the Chief Investment and Banking Officer of the state of Arizona. It's a term of 4 years with a total of 2 years, 2 terms. And that is a responsible position for holding all investments of the state agencies. $63 billion runs in and out of the cash flow throughout my office of the Treasury. And that goes to disbursements to state agencies, local governments, school districts, and tribal nations. It's a very important position to ensure smart and safe investments, not only for these entities, but we also voluntarily invest funds for our local governments, which are cities and towns. And I have made it a commitment as the treasurer these last 3.5 years to visit all 15 counties in Arizona. I was the first treasurer to do so in our history, ensuring that we have strong relationships with those leaders so that we can best invest their funds day to day. And we have seen with those new formed relationships that we have increased earnings by over 75.4% to our local governments, which is a good thing because as they receive more money through investments alone, they have less need to tax their local citizens and more money to use for education, transportation, infrastructure, and the like. And so we have grown in that area. Beyond that, we manage the State Permanent Land Trust Fund, which means that whenever there are state lands that are sold throughout Arizona, the proceeds of those sales come to my office and we invest those funds. They go back to 13 beneficiaries who were outlined in our Constitution, and 93% of those funds goes to the K through 12 education system, which is a very important, distribution of funds. To give you an example of the dollar amount, in this fiscal year, we allocated $402 million to our K through 12 public schools. So those are the core responsibilities of my office. But in addition to that, I have made financial education and financial literacy a core position of my platform, because it is so important as we help families and individuals be smart about personal money management. It has a direct correlation to the fiscal health of the state of Arizona. So when we have strong families with their money, we have a strong economy in Arizona. And so I have gone throughout the entire state to ensure we have awareness of basic money management skills, teaching kids how to balance their checkbook, to pay off their debt, credit card month to month, as well as just understanding that this is not money that comes from the government, that just comes down on, from the sky, that you actually have to work for it and earn it and have that personal responsibility, save it smartly, and have that money set aside so it can grow and compound for your future. And so all of these simple practices not only go to our schools, but our senior citizens, our veterans, our military families, and our vulnerable families as well.
Great. So you mentioned the returns that were generated under your administration. And my understanding is there's going to be a flat tax, a state income tax of 3%, maybe next year that goes into effect, and that may go down to 2.5%. You can maybe correct me on the details, but it would seem to me that part of that is probably because of your administration of the money that you manage that has enabled the taxes to be lowered.
I've always been an advocate for lower taxes and really to allow for our economy to blossom with those who work, and those who are actually creating that economy need to be able to stay open. And as we have seen with this pandemic, and those businesses, especially mom and pop smaller businesses, have really struggled over these last couple of years to keep their doors open. And so being able to provide a lower tax system overall across the state is going to be smart going into the future. And as this transitions, we will see the balancing of this and ensuring that we in Arizona will continue to not only keep our businesses open, but to allow for that sentiment of pro-growth and being able to manage an economy that is strong. We are going to likely see continued growth in Arizona. We're one of the fastest growing states in the country. Why? Because we have this great tax system here in Arizona. Our neighboring states in California and others, they have a very high tax system. They have a very high regulatory system. That is not friendly to our small businesses. And so we have seen such growth in Arizona because so many business owners, families are fleeing those states to come to states like Arizona where there is a low tax. And in this flat tax that we will see, we will continue to see growth, not only in our economic numbers, but hopefully we see more businesses coming, more families coming because of this incentive. And that will continue to grow our economic standing. We are resilient in terms of our economy here in Arizona. We've maintained very strong numbers over the course of these last 2 years in comparison to other states in the country.
Okay. And just a question or two about the mechanics of operating the budget and the money under your control. So you mentioned that when land is sold, the proceeds go under your management. Are the taxes that are collected, do they go into the funds you manage? And then secondly, for the outflows, is that a function of the state legislature? They decide what to spend the money on. And
Yes.
the funds under your management, are they more like operating funds or more like long-term pension type funds?
We do not manage the pension systems in our Arizona Treasury. I know other states have different systems, but in Arizona, the Arizona Treasury does not do retirement pensions. We have two other organizations. It's the Arizona Retirement System and the PSPRS, which is the Public Safety Retirement System, all under the executive branch under the governor. So they manage their own. We actually outperform them. For the last 20 years, we have actually exceeded their numbers in investment performance. But we have an internal investment team, and our role is really like the state's banker. So we distribute funds as they are brought into the state. We're not the receiving agency. That is the Department of Revenue. So the Department of Revenue in Arizona collects those funds as they come in from sales receipts and others. But we receive the money just like a bank would. And we invest those funds internally with our investment team. To give you an example, our earnings and distributions in the time I have been state treasurer have gone to $2 billion. So again, when someone has those funds come in, we don't sit on that cash. We actually invest it wisely so that more money is earned for the taxpayer. And then we roll those distributions out. So as school districts need those funds, we as a bank or a financial institution will roll those dollars back out to every school district, every charter school in Arizona. Same thing with local governments. We don't determine how they use those funds. Local districts and local entities, municipalities have their local governing bodies, like a city council or a town council or a local school district governing board. They are the local bodies who determine how to use those funds. At the state level, the state legislature makes decisions on how to use state general funds. And so they provide a budget, it allocates funds for different pools of money in different funds, and then we distribute those funds just like any bank would. So that's kind of our role, and the most important role is to protect the taxpayer, ensuring that our investments are, key to earning more money for all of these entities, whether it's at the state level to the local government level, because those are earnings. Those are dollars that are on top of those allocations provided by the legislative branch. And so as we have that is less need to tax the local citizen.
Okay, great. So you talked about one of the projects that's very important to you, educating children or youngsters, the importance of money and how to manage their money. Is that wired into the curriculum, or is that an elective thing that schools can choose to teach their kids?
Yes, it was something that I've been passionate about for a good 15 years. I used to work for a former state treasurer as a member of his staff many years ago. His name was Dean Martin. And I learned by going into our schools that this basic money management, personal financial skills were not being taught. And as I would walk into the orientations of our universities and our colleges, I saw a number of credit card companies lined up to sign these young people how to sign up for their first credit card. And I would see upon these visits, one student go from one table to another to sign up for another credit card over another. And so when I started teaching these concepts about personal money management, I asked these young people, have you ever had a course in high school to teach your basic skills on money management? And they said no. So as I became a member of the legislature, I started putting in laws and standards for our schools to give them tips on how they can teach even a kindergartner, the idea of doing chores to earn their money, to really appreciate that those funds because they worked for it, and then to put those safely aside wisely or to spend it wisely. And those are little things that I've done over the course of the time. I ran into some barriers from those in our schools who didn't want one more thing to teach or didn't feel equipped enough, even as an adult, to teach it to young children. And so when I became state treasurer, I said, well, let's get this done. So finally, we passed a law in 2019 in my first 6 months in office that requires high schoolers to have at least one semester of financial education before they graduate from high school to be equipped with those basic core skills of money management. We don't require a particular curriculum because we have a very locally controlled school system in Arizona. So those local governing boards, those local schools can decide which curriculum to use. But on our Arizona Treasury website, we have free resources for children and for schools, families to use if they would like some guidance. But again, nothing is required in terms of curriculum. We allow those decisions to be made at every local level. But the important thing is that they are now teaching it as a requirement. Even that one semester may be, more than they're already receiving. receiving from their own home.
Yeah, it sounds like a great program, not only at the individual level to teach individual children how to manage money, but at the statewide level to teach young people the importance of work and the value of money. And that may help with the labor shortages issues we have in entry-level jobs. When high school kids, a lot of these kids don't like to work. They don't want to work.
Right.
But that's very important to get more people into the workforce because the lack of employees is very inflationary.
Absolutely. And we've also seen that there's a lot of, jobs that need that extra course before they get into the workforce, which increases the quality of our workforce. And so we've actually taken on a program with the whole theme of financial education, and it's called the AZ 529 Education Savings Plan. So for those who want to save, like you would save for your retirement, this is a savings plan for your children or your grandchildren or your niece or nephew, and putting money aside to save and let that grow with a tax deduction. It's $2,000 up to $2,000 for every child who has a savings plan. And again, per child. So if you have 2 kids, that's $4,000 for a parent to have in their tax deduction. And again, saving that money over a course of time, they can use that for college. They could use that if they want for vocational school. But when we took over the program in October of 2020, that was about 24 months ago, we've increased new accounts for these savings plans by 22,000 new accounts. So that's roughly 1,000 new accounts a month. And if you look at that number, that means we are preparing families to save for education, but we're also creating a wonderful quality of education for our future generations so that they're prepared before they go out into the workplace.
Great. Yeah, that's a great program. So there's been a movement the last several years to put pressure on money managers and state treasurers to go the ESG route that stands for environmental, social, and governance. And, my understanding of this is that if you look back a few years ago, the big trend in money management was index funds.
Right.
So, everybody had index funds, and it was very hard to differentiate yourself because if everybody's buying the same basket of securities, the returns are going to be very, very similar, and it's hard to charge a premium for generating at market returns. So the money management industry needed a new gimmick, to generate higher fees, to differentiate themselves without the burden of performing well. Right. There's this trend towards ESG. I don't like it, and I can tell you a few reasons why I don't really care for it. But what kind of pressures have been placed on you to adhere to the ESG policies, and what is your stance on ESG?
Well, environmental social governance types of policies are very progressive, left-leaning policies that are creating this trend in how corporations across America are being rated. And in my opinion, it is a political scorecard, not a financial scorecard, and it's going in a dangerous direction. We know that the Biden administration has encouraged ESG, not only in their policies, but their fiscal policies. And he has assigned a climate czar named John Kerry. And John Kerry is working behind the scenes with financial institutions across America, meaning banks, to encourage them not to finance those who are in the energy sector. Again, part of this ESG policy is to, have this new Green Deal or the climate change issues that, form where they stand on issues. So what they are trying to do is not lend financially to lawful United States-based corporations in the energy sector. And in my opinion, that's picking winners and losers. It's not part of the wonderful American free enterprise system. The free market doesn't have a big government saying, okay, we like this company, but we don't like that company. So we're going to give money to this company and we're not going to give money to that company. That's not American. And so I have fought and opposed those types of big government policies, and including ESG. It's something that we don't do in the Office of the State Treasurer when we determine our investments. We have always used the financial philosophy of safety before liquidity before yield. And that always provides us the best return on the dollar for our taxpayers. And it doesn't get into political statements. It doesn't get into these types of trendy policies that sound touchy-feely to, these woke corporations across America. Because when you go in that direction, you're no longer looking out for the taxpayer and the returns. And I don't oppose a personal, person who is going to go and do ESG in their personal financial portfolios. I'm in charge of state taxpayer dollars. So I have to hold to a higher financial accountability to give returns back to our hardworking Arizonans whose tax dollars are with my office. And so we cannot get into these political scorecards of ESG. And so just so you know, in August of this year, I was the first statewide entity to have a policy on the books, and we adopted it through our board of investment that says we will not take into consideration ESG in our investment determinations. We never have, and we never will. And I know other states are looking into it. Many legislative branches across the country are looking into it. They may even have drafted bills, but we were the first to pass it. And we did so that we would show not only Arizonans that we really do care a lot about how we invest your funds from a safety position and ensuring that the best returns go back on the dollar to the taxpayer.
Well, yeah, that's good. I think the returns can be higher when you broaden your perspective on the stock market. If you focus only on Disney and Starbucks, those are the only companies you buy, the returns are going to be reduced. And I think it's important to realize that there's a lot of greenwashing. A lot of funds say that they're ESG compliant or adherent, but you look at the different rating agencies in any particular company. By one rating agency can get a very high score, another rating agency give the same company a medium score, and then the third one gives them a low score. So I know the SEC is looking into the issue of greenwashing, and the German counterpart to the SEC has, I think, made some arrests and shut down some funds in Germany. Then there's also the other side of it, the opposite of greenwashing. I don't know what you want to call it, but you have these funds that don't market themselves as ESG, but they adhere to the ESG philosophy. So you're getting your money managed that way when you didn't sign up for that. So there's a lot of problems with that.
They forget about the consumer. And when you have these boards of directors who are at the top making these policies in their woke ways, you're forgetting about the consumer who actually does not, many of them don't share these same values. And I think we are seeing that movement of the average consumer in America walking away from some of these corporations or these companies who are going in a very far-reaching direction that is just too radical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a good point. You also have the fact that a lot of these companies that say they're ESG compliant are funding organizations that are not ESG compliant. Like, some of them fund Black Lives Matters, which even on their own website, they don't point to anything positive they've done. They don't point to one meal they've served to a poor person, or they don't point to teaching one child how to read. So funds can go to those types of organizations. And it's almost to the point where it's sort of a mafia situation. If you look, let's just say, for example, Starbucks supports Black Lives Matter or another organization, and that organization has another riot and they burn down the competing coffee shop across the street.
Right.
They know they won't attack Starbucks. So it's almost paying off for protection. The other thing I don't like about ESG is it's you mentioned the consumer, but also the employee. So if I'm a barista at Starbucks, I know that 10 cents of every drink I pour goes to a cause I don't believe in, abortion or transgender rights or whatever. And every time I pour that coffee, I'm forced to contribute to an organization that I don't believe in. So it's anti-democratic if you look at the employees in an organization that's very, very woke. And eventually, as a saying, you go woke, you go broke. Starbucks is a very woke company, but they're shutting down a lot of their stores because they're very permissive on crime, and crime is too dangerous for the employees to work in some stores.
Right. It's not an issue that is changing. David, if you don't mind, I'm going to have to get that and put it.
Okay. So another troubling thing I see with the woke corporations is they're censoring people that have different views than the woke views, and they're cutting them off from the financial system. PayPal had a policy which they later rescinded, but they were going to fine users $2,500 if they spread so-called misinformation. Just today, I heard something about Google's Gmail putting right of center campaign messages into the spam folder immediately. Well, they don't do that with the left of center messages. They go into the proper inbox. So anyway, maybe you can talk to us about your policies for banks that operate within the state of Arizona that cut people off from the financial system based on their political views.
That's right. It is really moving in that direction in so many of these corporations. And as the fiduciary of the state treasury, it's so important for us to keep a hold of what's happening. What is happening with these corporations? What direction are they going in? And are they standing for these very important issues that we believe in? Americans should stand for American companies. So when we saw that, the Russian and Ukraine situation was happening, we gave a letter to those who we do business with that indicated that we need to focus on American oil companies and ensure that we stand up for our American-based corporations in the energy sector. And if they were going to do business with those who are in Russia, we don't want to do business with you because we really need to stand up again for our very hardworking American corporations, especially in sectors that these woke agendas are going, against in the energy sector. And so one of the things that we do is we do banking services across the state. So we provide contracts to those financial institutions, and we know that there are a number of financial institutions who are either not lending to, for instance, this ESG policy with the energy sector. And if they're going that direction, we want to know that. If they are not lending to those who believe in our Second Amendment rights, for instance, ammunition companies, we want to know that too. And so as we look at banking contracts for the state, we are asking questions to filter where are they going in these types of decisions, because we have the right to know, because we're going to be doing multi-million-dollar contracts with them, and these contracts go for years. So we have seen a number of bills through the legislative process to keep an eye on this, this movement of where woke corporations are going, and to put a stop, again, to doing financial business with those who are going in a dangerous path of these progressive agendas. Now, how does the average taxpayer, how does this affect them? Because really, that's who we're protecting. That's who we are standing for. We, again, always go back to safety before liquidity before yield, which means it's a non-political type of, fiscal philosophy that we hold in the Arizona Treasurer's Office. Once you start walking down these progressive agendas, you don't get a return on your dollar, and that's proven. So really, we try to stay out of that, but we are keeping a careful watch of those corporations that are going down that path, because we are watching out for the taxpayers of this state. We have pushed back against corporations that are going down ESG, and then that even takes them down BDS. So Morningstar is a perfect example where we gave a notice to Morningstar because their subsidiary called Sustainalytics has an ESG rating, and their rating is determining whether or not businesses should do work in Israel. Well, Arizona has laws to protect against that type of discrimination, pulling out of Israel, and we consider that a boycott of Israel. So I have given companies like Morningstar, as recently as a couple of months ago now, a notice that I will put them on the prohibited investment list in Arizona's Treasury if they do not change their course of action.
Right. Well, thank you. So just for background, for people that are not familiar with BDS, BDS stands for boycott, divest, and sanction, particularly with regard to Israel. So yeah, there are some people out there that don't want to invest in companies that do business in Israel. I don't really understand the logic of it. Israel, of course, is a great ally of the United States, votes something like 99% of the time with the United States at the United Nations. And so many great technologies, life-saving technologies come out of Israel. Our quality of life in Arizona would be much worse if we didn't have Israeli technology and ingenuity. So we appreciate you being on the other side of BDS. I think your rival is probably for BDS, at least, that's the conclusion I would draw from his support of Palestinian organizations that are apologists for terrorist organizations. But I think there was some interaction you had relative to the Ben and Jerry's situation. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that scenario.
Well, a little bit of history. In Arizona, we have had a longstanding trade relationship with Israel. They're a great trading partner. If you look at the numbers, $677 million in bilateral trade between the state of Arizona and the state of Israel. And I value that great partnership that we've had over the years. But Israel is also a wonderful friend and ally of the great country of America. And so we value that relationship as well. So in 2016, Arizona passed a law that would fight against boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which is called an anti-BDS law. And it basically said any corporation that boycotts Israel shall not ever have financial business in the state of Arizona. That means that if we see a boycott in the future, we would have to remove our relationship with any of those corporations that were choosing that direction. So interestingly, in 2016, I voted on that very anti-BDS bill as a member of the legislature, proudly. Who would have guessed that years later I would become the state treasurer of Arizona and have to put that into action in administering that law? So in 2021 of last year, so the summer, we know that Ben & Jerry's announced that they would remove their 30-plus year manufacturing corporation of Ben & Jerry's from the West Bank. This affected Judea and Samaria. And that removal of that relationship to sell ice cream in the West Bank was a boycott. And so that raised an immediate red flag to me because it would trigger that 2016 anti-BDS law. So I notified Unilever, which is the parent company of Ben & Jerry's, that they were in violation potentially of this law in Arizona. I gave them an ultimatum, two choices. One, change your course of action and go back in and sell ice cream, or two, divest your relationship with Ben & Jerry's, Unilever, and we'll be fine. Well, they chose to do neither of those options. And so in September of last year, announced on Rosh Hashanah, in fact, I said, no longer will we be doing business with Unilever and Ben & Jerry's. I divested $143 million down to zero. And I ensured that Arizona will not have any financial holdings with a corporation like Ben & Jerry's, which was boycotting Israel, which is discriminatory, anti-Semitic, and wrong. I did not realize in that decision that I would be the first state in the country to divest funds such as this and make that statement. And so encouraging to see that it just in weeks following, the state of Texas divested $100 million of their state funds. The state of New Jersey divested $178 million of New Jersey funds. Texas and New Jersey also, we had Florida, they divested pension funds, in fact, and the state of New York divested. So we really did see a national movement of divestments in this particular situation with Ben & Jerry's and their decision. We want to continue to maintain our friendship with Israel and show them our support, not only with our words, but with our actions. And it was really encouraging for me to see that this news traveled fast across the globe, because on my social media, just days later, I had a wonderful picture on my Twitter account from someone, and they said, we want to thank you from Israel. And we heard the news. We want to thank you, and we pray for your safety. And I really just appreciated that this news traveled so quickly to our friends. And what the I guess to fast forward the story, this past year, about 2 months ago, I received notification from Unilever, and they said, Treasurer Yee, we have decided to change our course of action. So they sold their subsidiary of Ben & Jerry's to an Israeli manufacturer in the West Bank. So they will no longer boycott. They will continue to sell ice cream there. And that was an important decision that they made, removing their ties with Ben & Jerry's. Ben & Jerry's was not happy, by the way. They sued Unilever shortly thereafter. It didn't hold in a court of law, however, so the Unilever decision stands. And I shared with Unilever, thank you. Thank you for making that decision. Sorry it took so long. I was really disappointed it took so many months. I haven't decided to reinvest in Unilever at this time. They still have their relationship with Ben & Jerry's here domestically. But we are continuing to watch very carefully as these corporations make these decisions so that we will continue not only to follow our law, but to stand with our friends in Israel.
Do you think there's any logic behind the BDS movement? First, we appreciate you taking the anti-BDS stance. We really appreciate that. I don't understand the logic of the BDS movement. Sure, I mean, we could be concerned about Palestinians. That's fine. We want everybody to have a nice life and a safe life. But the standard of living of Palestinians in Israel is very, very high. It's much higher than in most of the Arab countries surrounding Israel. They can go to any university they qualify for, study whatever they want, get a job wherever they want, start a company. There's some Palestinians that are starting up companies in Israel. There's Palestinians in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. There's Palestinians that are diplomats for Israel. They can serve in the courts. They have equal footing in trials. Some Muslims have said, if I was going to be put to justice, I'd rather be put to justice in Israel than in other countries like Iran or Syria, Iraq, places like that. Anyway, is it just a function of anti-Semitism, or is there any rational reason why one could support BDS?
The BDS movement really started based on removing the economic viability of Israel. And in my opinion, that is an action of hate. And that is something where when you try to cut off economic viability, you're cutting off any power, any type of future for that the state of Israel. And I believe that is the direction of where the Palestinian authorities really began this movement. And it started on university campuses and it just continued to flow, maybe even under different names back then. But it's grown into what we know very well as BDS. And it's not a movement that's stopping. In fact, there is, as recently as weeks ago, a documentary called Boycott, and it's being shown across this country, not only in university settings, but in Arizona. My opponent in this race, who's a guy who's running for state treasurer, decided to show it at the state capitol on Capitol taxpayer paid funds on the grounds. And that to me was really going in a radical direction. Even people in his own party decided they would, put out a letter saying, this is wrong. Don't go see this film. And so it is something we continue to need to look at and fight in our state houses. That's why we in Arizona passed anti-BDS law to protect not only our funds, but I saw that after I made that decision in 2021, just last year, that not all of the Arizona funds were divested from organizations that I didn't have responsibility over. So as I said earlier, our pension systems, they have their own portfolios of investments run by other entities that invest for them. I wasn't sure that they actually had divested fully from Unilever or Ben & Jerry's, and in that case, we couldn't force them because I don't have that authority. I didn't know if our local governments continued, that we don't manage their funds, if they were continuing to invest in these types of anti-Semitic moves. Same with universities and school districts. So I passed a law in 2022, just earlier this year, that required all entities from local to state in the state of Arizona, anything that touched these types of corporations that went in this direction of boycott and boycotting Israel and BDS would be required, just like I did, to remove their investments and remove their funds altogether. And so that bill, again, is now law in the state of Arizona. And I believe that was a good move on our part to ensure that everybody make sure that we are accountable to our money and ensuring that these types of decisions where they are boycotting Israel don't have a penny involved in corporations that are making these discriminatory decisions.
I just want to make one comment about ESG and then a couple questions about Israel. So for those listeners that don't believe ESG can affect them, Jeff Weniger, who was your worthy challenger during the primaries, he told us, and all of his supporters are supporting you now, he told our LD that one of the big banks, I forgot the name of it, but one of the big banks is using social credit scoring for their individual customers. So they're trying to monitor how much carbon various customers use or how much carbon their businesses use. And almost like in China, you may get your credit cut off or you may have to pay a higher interest rates on your loans. So, this ESG movement is very invasive and it's very restrictive of freedoms that we have. And it's not something that only affects big companies and big money managers. If the progressives have their way, it'll affect each and every one of us if we adopt some kind of social scoring system. So anyway, we really appreciate your stance on the anti-BDS side. I think you mentioned that, well, maybe you can tell us again the extent to which Israeli companies have invested in Arizona and the extent to which Arizona has invested in Israeli bonds.
It was really wonderful for our Arizona legislature, not only to engage back in 2016 in legislation that was called anti-BDS protections, but even as early as 2012. Again, I was in the State House of Representatives, and we had a treasurer named Doug Ducey, who is now our governor in Arizona. And we worked together between the legislature and the Arizona Treasury back in 2012 to change the law that says you can only invest in U.S.-based companies. First of all, I absolutely believe that we should only invest in U.S.-based companies, and we have maintained that law. But then we made one exception, and that was to allow for the investment of the Arizona Treasury to also invest in Israel bonds. And that allowed for our investment in our trading room to have that flexibility so that we can also get a great return on our investment if we were to have holdings with Israel bonds. And so we started with a $5 million investment in Israel bonds back then. Then another $5 million came along later. In the time that I have served as state treasurer, we are now at $30 million in Israel bonds. I've tripled our investments, ensuring that we not only have a good, diverse portfolio of United States-based corporations, over 1,500 are in our portfolio, but also to invest in corporations that, again, provide us a great return on our investment. And we can include Israel bonds among our portfolio because we have had a legislative branch as far back as 2012, again in 2016, creating laws to protect our friends in Israel with anti-BDS legislation, and even today electing those who stand with Israel in divesting when corporations go the direction of boycotting Israel. And so how does this affect the Arizona voter? How does it affect Arizonans who are taxpayers? Well, you just know that you have people who are looking out for our allies. And we are making sure that our money is being invested in companies that stand with our values. And again, it has been truly an honor not only to see this through the years, not only through the legislative process, but now in action in administering these laws and putting them into action, but now to see that it's affecting other states and how they're making decisions, because they call over to us saying, how did you all do that? Like, did you just drop everything? No. You allow these types of investments to mature so that you're not losing money for your taxpayers. You don't just drop them all, all together in one day, but you watch how these companies are going and you make decisions based on whether you're going to decrease your exposure to these types of holdings because the companies just aren't valuable anymore. And beyond that, you do it responsibly. We have been working with so many other states and encouraging them to allow for investments in Israel bonds, to be able to make that fix in their legislative process, in their laws. But beyond that, to also look at your portfolios and ensure that you're having smart investments with people, with corporations that stand with us in America.
Okay. So just a clarification question. Arizona cannot invest in companies that trade on foreign stock exchanges?
Right. We do not hold any companies that are foreign. Mm-hmm. So these are Israel bonds. Again, we had to go back into the legislative process to allow for us to have U.S.-backed bonds.
As far as, so what if there was an Israeli company that was founded in Israel, incorporated in Delaware, and does a great deal of its business in the U.S.? Does that qualify or not?
No, it doesn't, because Israel bonds are backed by their government.
Okay.
So they're government-backed bonds, and so they're not Israeli companies. That's the difference in how the language was allowed for us to ensure that we are still using only U.S.-based companies.
Well, but I suppose you could invest in Teva and Amdocs and Checkpoint, right?
We would have to look to see that it's not violating our U.S. based only companies. But I see what you're saying is when they start doing, interactions with U.S., we could potentially see that there could be a partnership, but we would have to look very carefully on our legal side.
Yeah. To me, it seems like it's almost like Intel. Like Intel's an American company, but they have research and development and fabs in Israel too. Okay. Anyway, well, maybe just do a few more questions, maybe just quick answers, 2 minutes per answer, let's say. So the Biden administration passed legislation, and Mark Kelly supported it, to hire 87,000 more IRS agents. They say they're only going to go after billionaires, but there's not that many billionaires, people that have small businesses or professionals. So what can you do as the treasurer to make sure these IRS agents are not abusive of their power? Many of them will be armed. What can you do to protect citizens of Arizona from overreaching for all these new IRS agents?
I've written about a dozen or more letters just in the last couple of years fighting back against the Biden administration's invasive policies against our freedoms. And this is just next one that we're going to have to, continue to fight. But it's the same theme of big government upon the freedoms of our individual rights. And this is the IRS situation is just one more. We've been fighting Biden and his administration, even on the issue of privacy rights. Do you remember? It wasn't that long ago that they proposed a policy that the IRS would take a look at personal banking records. So your financial institution would hand over your banking records of $600 or more to the IRS. That's not that different from this, policy to put more of these auditors on the streets, because they want to take a look at what we're doing inside of our homes or inside of our businesses. And it's really an attack on our freedoms. I believe it was the largest data mining exercise proposal in U.S. history. And I wrote that to the Biden administration, and we ensured that would not be in the Build Back Better budget bill that we saw not that long ago passed on Capitol Hill. You didn't see it because there were people like me in financial offices across the country, including state treasurers and auditors, who said, no, this is a violation of your personal information. And when they say it's the top 1%, no, $600 is your everyday American. And it's not the American way for big government to take a look at what's happening inside your home or what's happening inside, your business, because these would have just been given over to the big government to see how you're spending your money. Well, these IRS agents are going to do the same thing, which is they're going to prey upon the people of America and what we are doing in our personal lives. And that is something, again, the big government approach. It's a socialism. It's, communism. All of those types of countries do this type of stuff, not America. And so I believe that Biden will be held accountable to this radical approach. And it's not going to work. Yes, it's a proposal. But I'm hoping that the people fight back. The Americans will fight back against this big government approach. And what can we do? I mean, we can continue as we had in the invasion of our privacy for the banking records. Say no. And what can we do to, as financial officers? We really do have to work with those who are creating these types of radical policies and put our foot down. We can't do business with people who are preying upon our good citizens in our state. And again, this is something we have just seen the beginning of. We're going to continue to work against it. We have a midterm election, and that really matters because we have seen now in these last 2 years how critical the leaders are in making these decisions and how far reaching they have gone. So I believe we could have a quick change if we elect the right people in these offices and in every level, really, because from the top down, if we fight back, we will have a voice.
I think you told me in a different conversation you're working with other treasurers in other states to try to figure out ways to mitigate the impact of all of these additional agents.
We do. We look at the policies that are coming down from Washington, D.C. as individually elected state treasurers or financial officers of these various states. And we write joint letters together. Often we put together policies to fight back against what they are proposing. And in the case, I mean, we really have won some good ones because, like that IRS proposal with the banking records, you have not seen that because we have really worked with partners across the country to say, no, that is just too much an invasion of our privacy. And we found friends in the banking industry, believe it or not, who said, no, we don't want to get in that business either. So again, we'll see that with this, the IRS agents and continued big government approaches and policies, they don't work here. We are America and we love our freedoms.
All right. So another question is Biden's proposal is efforts to forgive certain student loans. To me, that seems to be very unfair. You have a lot of small business owners, which I think your parents and grandparents were small business owners, and maybe they had to borrow money to start their stores and what have you. And we have a lot of people like that today that are borrowing money to start their little businesses, take a huge amount of risk. Some of them fail. Some will succeed, but those loans aren't being forgiven. The people that are working 18 hours a day to run their business, to meet payroll, to put a product on the market that people need, their loans are not being forgiven. But people that opted to go on a certain career path to study certain subjects, which may not have any market value, they're getting their loans forgiven. And I think worst of all, they said it's going to be like almost no documentation, like, very, very lax application process right at the time of the elections.
Right. I don't understand it. And I think the average American, no matter what party affiliation they don't understand this proposal because it's not fair. You're absolutely right. It's not fair because you have hardworking Americans who are barely able to pay their bills right now in Biden's inflationary environment, being told that when they made their responsible decision, whether or not they went to college, they made that decision based on their own budget. But now the big government is telling them they have to pay somebody else's bills. While they're trying to struggle to meet their own needs. And so one, there's no fairness in it. It's also unconstitutional, in my opinion, for the president to be trying to create policy on his own without going to the congressional level branch of government, which creates these types of policies and these funds. You can't just create laws out of the White House. And so we are seeing numerous court cases to fight back against this proposal. There's more than a handful out there. The Cato Institute has one that is still pending, and we need to carefully watch all of these to see where this will go. Again, it is radical in all respects. You also will see that these are graduate level college students, or they're not even students anymore. They have jobs, but yet they haven't been responsible enough to pay off their debt as they drive their BMWs to their workplaces. And these are the ones who are applying to get their debt repaid by the government. how does that affect the average family? Well, the average family who is working really hard to pay their own bills and be responsible for their own money and their own obligations have to pay somebody else's debt who isn't being responsible with their finances. And so there's a fairness issue, but there's also the issue that this comes at the worst possible time. Biden has created this inflationary environment, and yet he's putting an additional financial burden on the average family and the average business owner. And beyond that, you've got people like me who are trying to run our 529 plans and education savings and creating the message of personal responsibility, making sure you are working for your own money, that you're not sitting on that couch and waiting for the mailman to come with the government check in the mail so that you can just start collecting without working. And it's really fighting that new type of philosophy that you are, do this from the government, that you don't have to work for it. And you're entitled. That is not the approach that I was raised in. I was raised in a family that worked hard for every dollar, that work ethic, that really ensuring that you are working for your own money. And those are the principles we have to teach our young children. And we need to go back to those basics and those values. But again, we are going to fight this student loan forgiveness plan. I have been very actively fighting against it publicly. But again, there's more to come. I think there's a lot of court cases that are in the mix that we're going to see whether or not this is constitutional even to begin with.
Well, I think you're making very rational points that everybody can agree with. Actually, Nancy Pelosi would agree with you. A year ago, she said that the White House cannot arbitrarily, on its own, unilaterally, forgive student debt. So, a year ago, that was something Nancy Pelosi supported. So, everybody, I think, can agree with what you just said. Arizona, and particularly the greater Phoenix area, has been hit with the worst inflation in the country. I think it's 10, 11%. It's been 13. That way for 13%. It's been that, very, very high for many months. And it's got to be affecting everybody except for maybe the top 2 or 3% of the people. Every time you go to the store, sometimes you can't buy essentials. My wife just told me today at Sam's Club, they don't have eggs.
I know. Eggs are $6 a dozen.
Yeah.
At a local grocery store. They used to be 99 cents in the spring during Easter. I mean, I don't get it. It's the Biden inflationary environment.
So everybody has to be concerned about this. Everybody goes to the store a few times a week. Everybody has to fill up their cars with gas. And I think it's beyond debate that the Biden Democrat liberal policies have caused all this inflation. Just a couple of reasons. Number one, spending huge amounts of money. We just talked about it. According to Wharton, the Biden debt forgiveness will cost $1 trillion. And spending money where, we don't need it. Another one is the first day Biden took office, he shut down the oil pipelines, natural gas pipelines. And, without energy, you can't do anything. You can't produce food. Natural gas goes into fertilizer. You need fertilizer to grow crops. You need trucks to deliver the crops to the store and the processing and refrigeration at stores. So you need a lot of that. The price of fuel is very expensive. Had the vaccine policies, a lot of people didn't want to get the vaccine, so they lost their jobs. The labor market was tighter because of that, and so wages go up, prices go up, and all the crime that your opponent and a lot of these very, very woke liberal Democrats are supportive of, whether it's at the district attorney's level or whether it's having an open border. Anybody can come in, no matter what your background is. That is inflationary. Stores have to spend more money on security. They have to spend more money on insurance. Sometimes they can't get insurance. They have to spend more money on other preventative measures. They have to distance their products from the customer's hand. You go to Best Buy, a lot of their products are in cages, so they can't be stolen. You have all these problems. Your idea of training kids to learn a little bit about finance is good. They'll appreciate money to go into the workforce, maybe more willingly, maybe earlier. That's good. But can you as a treasurer do anything, even in a small way, to offset some of these terrible inflationary policies your opponent would exacerbate?
Yes, in many ways, even small ways, but many ways. I think we really do have a voice as statewide constitutional officers. As the state treasurer, I have a platform, and I can talk about these real issues that are affecting real families. And I have, and in fact, as I stated in these last 2 years under Biden, I have been not only managing the day-to-day office of the investment, 63 billion that goes in and out, but I'm fighting back against the Biden administration and his radical policies and using that voice to do so with other state treasurers across the country. And in that effort, we have really successfully pushed back against some of these radical policies, but it goes beyond policies. We've pushed back against some of his appointments to keep positions by socialists. I mean, there are people he has nominated to go in front of the United States Senate for confirmation that we've written numerous letters opposing because they are crazy radicals that want to create a socialist America. And we know one of them was schooled and educated in Moscow. Mm-hmm. She, through a lot of letters that were written and calls that were pressuring the committee that was to confirm her, we pushed back against her confirmation, and guess what? She put her resignation in to go further into the confirmation process because she saw she was not going to get the votes by Republicans and Democrats on that committee. So there are little things that we can do with our voice in these various offices, but they're important because everything is being crept in at all angles. And so beyond that, smart investments, what the money that we are collecting in Arizona through sales and receipts and purchases, real estate, I mean, all of this comes to the office for safe investments. And that's more money on the dollar that goes back to the taxpayers directly, so that we don't have any further need to tax, beyond what we currently have in our state. And that is a key position, because if you have the wrong person in there who isn't making safe investments, you aren't going to get any returns on your dollar. There's nothing. I mean, it really will be play money for them. So I really do feel there are many ways that we have a voice in the office of the state treasurer, but beyond that, working across the country to ensure that we move these positions and get the right people elected in office, because really we've seen a changed America in these last 2 years.
Right. Okay. Any final comments you'd like to make about the importance of this election, or any ways you would like to distinguish yourself from your rival?
Well, again, I'm Kimberly Yee. I'm the current state treasurer of Arizona. It's been an honor to serve these last 3.5 years. As state treasurer, we've created earnings and distributions of over $2 billion in that short period of time. Our assets under management have increased from 15.4 billion to 30.2 billion. Again, in a 3.5 year period, that's a 96% increase. It's outstanding work. And in this time where we have fiscal uncertainty, we need to have that proven conservative, that steady hand at the wheel in an office that is in charge of so much of Arizona funds. And so as your viewers may be interested, take a look at my record, and I can be reached at kimberlyyee.com for more information.
Great. Well, Kimberly, it was a real pleasure to have you speak to us today. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. Kimberly Yee has been a great treasurer for the state of Arizona. She's done a fantastic job of managing our treasure in Arizona. She's grown the portfolio to a large extent. She brings common sense and sensibility and pragmatism to her position. She does more than serve the people of Arizona. She collaborates with other reasonable treasurers in other states, and by collaborating, they have a stronger voice. They're able to push back a bit on crazy policies such as hiring 87,000 more IRS agents to harass the hardworking professionals and business people of Arizona and other states. And as Kimberly mentioned, she has played an important role in blocking very problematic federal appointees. You're very forward-looking, very progressive in terms of your policies such as educating kids on financial management. Maybe you're sort of the maybe you don't get as much attention as Governor DeSantis, but you have a lot of common sense policies, and you're a leader in anti-BDS and pro-Israel policies. So we really appreciate that. And I think voting for Kimberly Yee is important, especially for the people of Arizona, but even beyond, because she reaches across the aisle and reaches across state lines to not only serve the people of Arizona, but to help other treasurers serve people in their states. The last thing I like to mention is this election is very, very important. If the Democrats maintain control of the executive branch and both legislative branches, be prepared for some November surprises. The Biden administration has been depleting the strategic oil reserves. Right after Election Day, there probably won't be any oil in the strategic reserve, and prices could skyrocket. We've seen what's happened with the Biden administration almost forcing, in some cases, forcing people to get vaccinations, which now are largely debunked to a great extent. People were at risk and have lost their jobs if they didn't succumb to getting vaccinated. And there's just terrible policies as far as railroading kids into terrible things like transgenderism. So anyway, those are my comments only. Kimberly spoke for herself. But thank you very much, Kimberly.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.